Okay, 7:36 p.m., 6/14/2023. Still reading the Diane Ladd book. And this is amusing to me. I never meant to, read this whole book out loud and record it, but here we are. I'm not even particularly a Diane Ladd fan. I don't hate her. I've never watched that many of her movies. This thumbnail that I put in today is from Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, and I have seen that movie, but it's been a long time. And from what little clips I've seen online, she plays a real bitch in it, which is fun, and she does a good job. But let's go back here and see where I left off. From Honey Baby Mine. Okay, I left off on chapter 6, Walk 6, Green Leotards and Showfolk. In this chapter, they have a lot of inserts of beautiful family photos. Diane. Laura, this morning I talked to the Environmental Working Group and to the Agricultural Commissioner. We've got to get members of the community who've also been dealing with this pesticide that's hurt me. We need to write to the governor. We have to stop the use of glyphosates. Laura, Mom, you're incredible. I was actually going to tell you that I did what you asked and talked to your neighbor and to the environmental attorney. We're all on top of this, but I have to say, you're such a badass. Here I'm worried about you having enough energy to walk a few steps, and you've already spent 3 hours on calls today talking about petrochemicals. And not to protect yourself, but to protect others from what hurt you. You blow my mind. Diane. So, Laura, what are we going to talk about today? Laura, let's talk about your environmental activism. Diane. No. After having been on these calls for hours, let's please talk about something else. Laura. Okay. How about this? Thinking about your activism, I just had a flashback to that Equal Rights Amendment rally you and Jane Fonda and Ed Asner took me and Belina to when we were 11. Diane. Oh, right. You two were so cute in your green leotards. Laura. Yes, that morning we woke up all excited to march, and you said the color of the event was green, so we put those on. And then, do you not remember what you did to us? Diane. What did I do? Laura. You were giving a speech up in front of thousands of people in this park in downtown LA, and you said, my daddy taught me a song. This song meant everything to me, and now I'd like to introduce you to my 2 backup singers. And Belina and I looked at each other in horror as we realized that you meant us. You dragged us on stage and made us sing in front of thousands of people with no warning. The horror of being 11 and having to perform in green leotards. It was basically child abuse, but you were like, come on, girls, we're show folk. This is what we do. Diane, well, we are. And even though the ERA didn't pass, that work was important. Okay, so I'm turning the page, and there's beautiful photos of Diane at 16 with 50s cars, I think, 40s and 50s cars that are really pretty. She was really, really pretty. So it's really nice of them to share this. And you can see where Laura Dern gets her genetics from. She really does. Especially this baby photo I'm looking at of Diane. Looks exactly like Laura. So they have pictures of Diane first, and they have pictures of Laura. Laura's high school graduation photo, which is adorable. Oh. And some of these pictures are a little hard to see because of the quality of the photographs. It's kind of washed out a little bit in the brightness, but it's still nice. These are very sweet pictures. Crystal Scarborough swimming lessons. It's pretty. Let's see. And I'm not a fan of Diane's work. I think she's a terrific actress. Admittedly, I just haven't seen much of her work. Let's see. Laura in glasses. Laura opening a present. Uh, they've had a very happy life. Belina. I forget who Belina was too. Laura, you must have had such a hard time when you were starting out. When I see photos of you at the age of 16, I think you were so young to be in New York City with no money, knowing no one, with only a dream to become an actress. Diane, I knew what I wanted to do. And that right there is what gets me. That's 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 what I want. Laura, but you must have been so vulnerable. If a guy was going to mess with me on a set, they were crazy because people knew my parents. Dad was the guy who shot and killed John Wayne and the Cowboys. I figure Dad's tough guy persona saved me from some real shit. Not that guys were never inappropriate, but in terms of really being in danger. I feel like my family's reputation offered me a little protection that other actresses my age didn't have. And like them, you had no one. And that era was so different. I mean, as a teenager, you had to wear heels to every audition, right? Diane. Oh my, yes. On an interview, you didn't wear slacks and you had to dress to the nines. When I first started out as an actress, I had a manager who said, "Make sure there's no rip in your stocking." That manager didn't worry about his male clients having a rip in their socks. Still getting over this. And your heels could not be scuffed. Your clothes had to be pressed. You needed your hair done and makeup flawless. And you had to make sure that damn seam up the back of your calf was straight. Oh my God. Like that. Oh my God. Laura, I'm glad you eventually rejected that hyper feminine thing so many of our relatives in the South had. Grandma Mary always had her hair set if she left the house. She would never go to the market without lipstick, ever. Diane, we used to put her hair in curlers, right? Laura, totally. All you Southern girls were raised with the credo of putting your face on. I first heard the expression when Mary Kay Place said it in Citizen Ruth. It reminds me of one time when Reese and I were doing press. We'd done a few interviews and our makeup and hair team had left. On a quick break, she said, "Dern, look through your purse. Give me some lipstick." I pulled out a lipstick and handed it to her. She looked at me as if I'd handed her a Sharpie and said, "Dern, that's not lipstick, that's brown." It's funny. Diane, ha. Of course, as a Southern lady, she thinks of lipstick as always either pink or red. Laura, Reese is able to get out of it when she's working and be totally raw as she was in Wild. And I think she and I would agree that a lot of that way of being a vulnerable woman on screen started with you and the other girls, great rebel actors we worship from the 70s cinema. I can't remember you having a full makeup on for anything but work. Makeup aside, though, you're still a Mississippi kid who found her way into this world. You never let anyone wait on you, and you've always been a hard worker. I mean, you love a bedazzled baseball cap, but you never went in for posturing. Diane. True. And, well, that's lovely of you. But there are so many others who had to fight even harder to get out from under the pressure to be glamorous. How about Jane Fonda? She had a movie star father, and she appeared in Barbarella, but she wanted to be a serious actor, so she fought for it. And she did Clute, great movie, and Coming Home, haven't seen it, with your father, Laura. She produced that herself. My God, such hard, emotionally raw stories she's given us. Laura, remember when Shelley took me to the Grauman's Chinese Theater 1978 premiere of Superman? Diane, yes, I was out of town working somewhere. Laura, she wore no makeup, a white t-shirt, false eyelashes, a full-length fur coat, and sneakers. It's such a good look, although you and I would wear fake fur. She was walking down the red carpet, and I was holding her hand, and people were shouting, "Shelley, Shelley, why are you seeing Superman?" And she said, "I'll see anything with Marlon in it." Marlon Brando was playing Jor-El. I was 12 and couldn't get over the length of her false eyelashes. I'm going to take a pause here. I watched that Shelley Winters interview with Johnny Carson where she dumped a glass of water over Oliver Reed's head because Oliver Reed was being stupid and sexist. And then I watched an interview with him, to be fair, describing the fact that he couldn't get a word in because she kept interrupting him. And And I don't know if he went on that tangent just to like get to her, or if that's how he really felt, or if he, if he was just expressing how he truly felt. But if she wouldn't, not shut the fuck up, but like she had a turn to talk and then he had a turn to talk and she wouldn't let him have his turn, I could see how irritating that would be. And I could see why he might have like goaded her. Made for great TV though. And I don't agree with what he said, but I think I think it's fair to say he was right to have a turn to talk at least. Diane, she wore those always. She said they made her eyes sparkle. Laura, that was very you at the time, too. No makeup, a light lipstick, and always those big false eyelashes, even if you were just at home with her having a scotch and soda. God. Diane, Shelley never drank. Not really. Oh, that's a surprise. Laura, yeah, but it was just the women being together. You might put on false eyelashes just to feel good together. I love that so much, so unceremonious with such an un-Hollywood lack of effect. Lack of need for the biggest house, lack of desire to put your face on before people come over. I wanted to play characters who weren't trying to be what they weren't, who could be out there with untamed hair and sweatpants and a t-shirt. And you did, because you were rifling through dino shit with rubber gloves. For me, as a little girl, what I witnessed were these women who let themselves be known in all their complexity. I saw their pores. Their skin was never covered up with tons of makeup. It was something really profound to me about who I wanted to be if I was going to be an artist. The kind of woman who carries herself with deep authenticity in her life, in her style, in the way she lives, in the way she shares her stories with her friends, in the way she's willing to be vulnerable. You were complicated and direct, and that's how I will always try to be because of your example. Wow, she's really laying it on thick here. Diane, what beautiful memories and what a great testimonial. I lived it and don't see it as clear as you. Laura, on the subject of glamour, one thing I've always wanted to ask you about is when you were still young and you had to really doll yourself up. Like when you worked at the Copacabana. Wasn't that just awful? Diane, being a Copa girl was actually so much fun, Laura. Laura, you were never harassed there? Diane, oh my, no. You would do the show and then you would sit at a table and look beautiful as part of the ambiance. We were expected to be very professional and to look as elegant as possible in our expensive costumes. However, we were never required to mingle with any guests. In fact, it was quite the opposite. You could look at us but not touch. No one dared approach our table without permission. The only time a man would approach us was if someone was taking a publicity picture or a celebrity was allowed to come over and compliment us on the show. If anyone else came toward our table, immediately several men in tuxedos who looked an awful lot like mobsters would come out of the woodwork and say with deadly looks, "Where are you going, sir?" My group included twins who were not only great dancers but also water skiing champions, a magazine cover model, and a young actress who just graduated from London's RADA and later married the actor William Shatner. Laura, weren't you ever preyed upon? Diane, of course. Like any woman, I did have those experiences. Somewhere in childhood. Once I was walking home alone from school, and a man in a white car came really close by the curb and said, "Hi, little girl. Would you like some candy?" Having been trained by my mother, I said, "I don't want any candy," and I ran up to the nearest house and pretended to live there. From the steps, I yelled, "I'm going to tell my mother you tried to just get me in the car and give me some candy, and you took off." Laura, how old were you? Diane, 7. Laura, oof. You know what's sad? I hardly know anyone who wasn't assaulted or harassed at some point in their childhood. Diane, you're bringing back so many memories. When I was 17 and trying to break into film, I got invited to go to my first movie set. I borrowed my girlfriend's suit, stuffed my bra, and put on heels. On the way, I was getting honked at and stopping traffic, so I must have looked pretty good. Laura, I believe it. Here's a photo of you I just found online that I'd never seen. Do you remember this? And this is from, I assume she's talking about the photo insert that I'm looking at. It's from the Stiegel. Richard Benjamin and Diane in The Steagle. Yeah, and she looks gorgeous. Diane, oh my god, look at that. That's a still from The Steagle. 1971. The director wanted me to act like Marilyn Monroe. She looks like Jane Mansfield, actually. That is a very Marilyn dress. He also wanted me to play my character with crossed eyes the whole time. Said I couldn't do it because I refused to ruin my eyes. But my god, look at that bust. Yeah, she looks pretty. I must have had stockings and a bunch of other stuff tucked into the sides to push that up. That's funny. But those are my real legs. Looking good, deal. Laura, but go back to the story. Diane, right. My friend introduced me to Spencer Tracy, and as he and I shook hands, a crew member made a dirty jerk off gesture behind my back. Laura, ew. Diane, exactly. I didn't see it, but I saw Spencer's appalled reaction, and someone told me what happened. Spencer, who was a gentleman, said, "We're going to sit you here next to the camera so you can see everything that's going on." Where, by the way, I would be out of the crewman's reach. Spencer was polite, gracious, and loving. He had cancer, so he stopped at 5:30 every day. When 5:30 came that day, they were in the middle of a scene, so the director, Stanley Kramer, asked him if he could please push through and finish the scene. He agreed, but asked the same crew member who'd made the lewd gesture for a glass of water because his throat was hurting. The guy said, "Get it yourself, I'm not your slave." Spencer said, "What did you say? I'm not your slave?" Laura, what a revolting comment. And my god, to be so disrespectful to Spencer Tracy, too. Diane, Spencer walked over and said, "No, but you're a parasite. You've been sipping beer, playing poker. You disrespected a young lady. You're a rude man and you're a mean man. I saw you last night shoving some extras. You're a disgrace to your fellow crewmen and you're a loser. You're being paid and you're doing nothing. I'm going to finish the scene, and if there's no glass of water when I get back, from now on I'll ban you from the set, even if I had to pay your salary while you stay at home and sit on your backside." At the end of this scene, the water was there. The other crew guys loved Spencer Tracy. He probably spit into it after that, but it's nice to hear that Spencer Tracy was nice. I like hearing stories about men from that era being, not even being gentlemen, but just being decent. And not being jerks. Laura. Wow, what a guy. Also, Mom, didn't you tell me some casting couch story once? Oh, God, here we go. Diane, which one? Oh, I mean, I was so innocent I would walk through evil and not even know. One time a coworker's brother said he'd drive me home. I was broke. The other chorus girls and I would go to the bar and order a beer and then eat all the bread and butter we could stand because we couldn't afford proper meals. Oh. So I was happy for a free ride home. It's never free. He said he just had to pick something up at his motel. He invited me in and said, "Make yourself comfortable." And then he attacked me. I fought him off, but that was scary. I can tell you that Hollywood has some bad people. I guess everywhere does. Laura, but what was the other story you have about the poolside meeting? Diane, oh, that. Oh, baby, you just want to keep me talking, so I keep walking. I got your number. Anyway, I was spotted in a dance show and invited for lunch and a swim by the famous president of Columbia Pictures, Harry Cohn, who was then about 60. He said he thought I showed promise and had a youthful look. I did, because I was 16. I put on a black velvet bathing suit and showed up for the meeting. He told me to sit next to him, and I did. He asked me what I wanted to drink, and when I asked for lemonade, he laughed. He and his henchmen were drinking cocktails, but I was brought a lemonade. As I was drinking it, he took his hand and slapped it down on my thigh, right next to my crotch. I froze and looked at him shocked. Then I picked up his hand and threw it back at him. As I got up to leave, he said, "You'll never be a star that way, honey." Laura, you showed him. Diane, uh-huh. Am I a star yet? I just slept with people I fell in love with, or who I married. I like to think I protected you from all that, but I worry that you still saw some of it. Laura, well, of course. When I was 13, I'd do auditions with 50-year-old directors alone in a hotel room at the Chateau Marmont. Why wasn't the casting director in the room? Why did it have to be like that? Why was I asked to sit on a bed to read? A number of times I was alone in a room with a director, sitting on a bed to read, which never felt comfortable or safe. By good fortune, those were not moments where men took advantage. She was lucky. It's nothing a young actor or actress should ever deal with, and luckily, they would most likely not have to deal with that now. I don't know about that one. Diane, chilling. Did anything really ever bad happen to you on those auditions? Laura, like you, Mom, I've been around dangerous people. Fortunately, if something got creepy, there was always someone there to rescue me at the last minute. You know what's so tragic and disturbing for so many women and young girls and boys is that often when it feels inappropriate and scary is when you shut down. Luckily for me, I don't have a story of severe trauma to share with you, but I definitely was often uncomfortable and knew that something wasn't the way it should go. But I didn't bring it to you. I thought I should trust the adults and not complain. That's bullshit, of course. That's an old model that I pray your grandkids' generation has wiped away. Your teacher, your priest, your coach, or your director or co star may be the last person you should trust. That's a heartbreaking truth that I think young people know now. You're a little naive, Laura. Diane, and it's not always men kind of thing. Roger Corman, who gave so many people I know big breaks me, your dad, Jonathan Demme, Jack Nicholson, Harry Dean Stanton, Susan Strasberg, Peter Bogdanovich, and on and on and on, told me that one girl trying to get a job offered herself to him and literally chased him around his desk while he ran for his life. That's awful. Laura, I think that was probably a much rarer situation than your poolside meeting, but I think it's important to acknowledge that women can be awful too. Of course, it's important. It goes back to middle school. A girl would say, "Oh my God, I was in the bathroom and so said that you're so not her best friend anymore. Just so you know." I think we've been doing that since seventh grade. I don't think boys are sitting around in middle school talking about how they're better friends than the other boys. And especially in your era, if a woman got the one seat at the table designated for women, the boys were looking at her like, "Well, you better show us you're not going to make girly decisions here, Diane." And then they'd be as sexist as any man. Laura, I worked with a couple of women in and around film and television who were made to feel that they needed violence or nudity, and they would push people in one direction or the other without considering how a young woman might feel about certain choices. I mean, it wasn't until the last few years that even you and I started talking more deeply about all this. You know what I was thinking about the other day? That horrible crew member on that set who was always manhandling us. Diane, oh, he was the worst. Laura, why did we take so long to say anything about him? Diane, well, we did eventually after he lifted my skirt up in front of everyone. Laura, that's right. Finally, we said, enough is enough. We had to just stop commiserating with each other and bring it up to the people in charge. Yeah, but even then, instead of anyone implying that they were sorry we had this experience, they were worried about making him feel bad. That was the whole focus, how to help him understand why his behavior needed to change. He didn't give a shit, probably. But they wanted to make sure he knew that he could keep his job. And we were part of that too. Maybe if there's any way you could just be more mindful because it made us feel uncomfortable. Why were we so nice about it? He was deeply impacting our ability to do our job. It was not good for anybody, and yet we were uncomfortable making him feel embarrassed or bad, and in no way, shape, or form had it crossed our minds that we would ever want to see him fired. Diane, well, I understand a reluctance. Every crew member on most sets is male. If there's a nude scene or a delicacy required and you need help with something, it feels like there's no one else there to help you. You don't want to make the people responsible for lighting you and feeding you and dressing you mad. Laura, so many bullies fall because one person is brave enough to come forward. Then so many others know that their experience wasn't an isolated incident. And I have to point out that we are two privileged white actresses. We've dealt with all this bad behavior, but the women of color we know have had it so much worse when it comes to the lack of roles, consideration, and opportunity. True? My God, at least we're seeing some shifts now in not only casting but crew and production. And safety on set, thank God, but also in terms of gender and diversity parity. Parity. Not parity. Parity. Party, maybe? Luckily, there are more and more companies and producers ensuring that any work environment we enter reflects the way the real world looks. Diane, it's about time. And if you think what it was like when you started out was bad, can you imagine when I started? On sets, there were no women on the crew and not one person of color. In the theater, it was different. I certainly worked with much more diverse casts and crew in theater than in TV and movies. Things are better now in that regard, but man, it's taken a long time. Laura, even when I started 20 years after you on my first movie, there were no women on the crew. Men did my makeup and hair. Diane, sadly, I'm not surprised. Laura, I look at Jaya and Ellery's generation, and they are so much more aware and so much more comfortable in their own skin. They're growing up in a different world than we did. Filling out paperwork at a doctor's office the other day, Jaya said, "Wait, what are these questions? Race? Religion? They have no right to ask me those questions. It would never have occurred to you or me that we didn't answer the questions we were asked." Jaya's mantra is, "Nobody's going to tell me to shut up." I'm so inspired by her confidence. Diane, me too. Laura, speaking of which, I should get back to her now. Let me get you home. You did great today. No coughing, huh? Diane, well, I'm exhausted. I'm going to sleep for a week. Laura, not a week. Remember, we're doing this every day. See you first thing in the morning. Laura, talking with my mom about the pressure to look good and to navigate uncomfortable situations is taking me right back to middle school. I'm realizing that my mom helped me avoid so much of that need to fit in that young girls often have, understandably, because we've been raised on images of perfection and taught to chase archetypes of what it means to be pretty or perfect. In our household, imperfection was both the family business and pastime. Mom and I weren't getting manicures together, we were watching Hal Ashby movies. Actually, I wouldn't have minded a mani-pedi now and then. Still, there were times when I felt the pull of social pressure and had to look to my mom for help navigating it. At my middle school, we had to wear uniforms, but the rich girls still found a way to compete. We were only in eighth grade, but they would come in with Louis Vuitton purses. When I told my mom about this, she could have said, "Let's get you a purse." Instead, she listened, and then she said, "Laura, what makes you feel good about yourself? What kind of clothes do you like?" I said, "I like bright colors." "Okay," she said. "Well, I know you have your uniform, so you're limited there, but what bright accessory do you want to wear?" I said, "Well, we can wear whatever socks we want, and I always thought it'd be so cool to wear knee-high socks in bright colors." Her eyes lit up. "Oh my God, you've got to do it," she said. She made me feel clever and like we were about to embark on a big adventure revolutionizing my wardrobe together. She bought me a bunch of wild knee-high socks. The next day I put on my gray and white uniform like usual, but instead of the typical little tennis ball athletic socks and capizios like all the other girls wore, I pulled on a pair of bright red, almost day-glow socks and my saddle shoes. "What are you wearing?" one of the girls said, her voice dripping with disapproval. "Aren't they great?" I said. All day, I was mocked, but I thought I looked good, and that was all that mattered. So I think that was a revelation, that perfection for me meant finding my own thing, not playing the game everyone else was playing. My mom helped me find a new game. Every day after that, I showed up to school in crazy socks. The other girls got bored of teasing me because I would just roll my eyes when they did. And guess what? No matter what you do, some people are going to be mean, and some people are going to love you, and that's what life is. And then when I started acting around that same time, the roles I took were not about looking hot or like everyone else. Case in point, ladies and gentlemen, the fabulous Stains. Stains is a 1982 cult movie directed by Lou Adler and written by Nancy Dowd that involves a girl forming a punk band with her teen cousins. I was so excited to have such a cool and substantial part. My first job in Fox's had been just a couple of scenes. I thought it would be an incredible opportunity and a lot of fun, especially because I loved music. Real musicians are in the film, including some even an eighth grader would have known at the time, Steve Jones and Paul Cook of the Sex Pistols, Paul Simonon of the Clash and Fee Waybill of the Tubes. I was very young, so my mother fought me on taking the job, but eventually I won. She felt better once she arranged to have a responsible girlfriend of hers stay with me for the whole shoot and play Mama Bear on set. I left at the beginning of 8th grade to do the movie, and I had my 13th birthday a month into filming. It was a pretty radical experience on a lot of levels. I remember when I showed up on set, I had long blonde Alice in Wonderland hair down to my elbows. The hairstylist gave me a pixie cut with a tail and dyed it black, then bleached the top and down the middle skunk-like. Having my identity as a long-haired, innocent girl completely altered was my first experience of becoming a different person on screen. And even though I had a guardian, I saw plenty in the realm of sex and drugs. Who would have thought that the movie set of a movie featuring the Sex Pistols would be the place where a kid would decide to never do drugs? I saw people shaking from withdrawal and walked into rooms where cocaine was sitting out, and I found it all very confusing. Being exposed to too much too young led to a healthy terror for me. Ironically, Paul and Steve were protective of me and honest with me about drug use and the heartbreak that it had caused them. They just lost Sid Vicious to an overdose. Fuck him. When I returned to 8th grade with my short hair, having witnessed some real life shit, the class was reading The Diary of Anne Frank out loud. As one girl came to the line about Anne getting her period, everyone started giggling and the girl blushed. I just rolled my eyes. I couldn't relate to middle schoolers anymore in their innocence. After what I'd seen and experienced on the Stain set, returning to school into my mom's home, I didn't feel like a kid anymore. The Fabulous Stains. Okay, we're getting to Bruce Dern, and that's kind of why I wanted to read this. Part of why I wanted to read this book. I can see a picture of Bruce and Diane, the Wild Angels. And I'm going to take a break because I need to blow my nose and cough, which is annoying, but nobody's really listening to these, so fuck it. 8:08 p.m., 6/14/2023. Bruce Dern. Don't get sick. Don't get sick. One more sip. Thirsty. Walk 7. The Angels' Fault. It's a nice picture of Bruce in there. Diane, you look nervous. Are you scared to ask something? Laura, a little. Diane, it's now or never, Laura. What do you want to know? Laura, well, I realize that I avoid certain questions because I never want to hurt you and it must be hard to talk about, but I've always wondered. How did you become pregnant with my sister? Diane, oh. Laura, is it okay to ask? Diane, of course. I'll tell you if you really want to know. Your father and I met doing Orpheus Descending. Laura, didn't you actually meet on stage? Diane, yes. After we'd moved to off-Broadway, the male lead had gotten another part and was leaving our show. A promising young actor, Bruce Dern, who'd already done 2 Broadway shows and had some good reviews, replaced him. And you might say Orpheus Descended. Laura, oh, Mom. That was the detail I remembered, that you met on stage in front of an audience. That's so crazy. Diane, but it was far from love at first sight. I had a monologue at the opening of the play. You've got to get the audience right away, and I got my audience every night. Except when Bruce comes, suddenly I feel my audience's attention shifting. What was wrong? I look behind me at the corner of the store set. Bruce is over there looking through shoeboxes while I'm doing my monologue. After the curtain call, I cornered him backstage and I said, "Boy, you better listen to me. When I'm on stage doing my monologue, you do nothing. Do you hear me? You don't move on that stage when I'm doing my monologue. Do you hear me, Bruce Stern?" He said, "Oh, all right." I said, "I mean it. I'll come after you right on stage if you do it again. Don't you dare." That's how we started. Laura, so how did you wind up dating? Diane, well, I was about to take off and let my understudy do the part for a while because I was trying out for this other Broadway play, Weekends with Feathers. Laura, right. What was that play about? And she has some inserts from the playbills. And Tennessee Williams's Orpheus Descending. Let's see. I don't see a date. I have the play though, because I have all of his works. Oh, that's so cool. Oh, they printed the entire bill with the cast list, the biographies of the actors, the breakdowns of the 3 acts, and the ads of the time. Oh, the lychee tree. Oh, that's so cool. Okay, I want to read from the playbill a little bit. The actors' biographies of Bruce Dern. Mr. Dern, who hails from Winnetka, Illinois, is the nephew of Archibald McLeish and a grandson of George Henry Dern, a former governor of Utah and a secretary during FDR's administration. When he decided to making acting his career, he auditioned for and was accepted by the Actor Studio, where he was seen by Jules Garfien, who cast him in Shadow of a Gunman. Immediately following the closing of this play, Elia Kazan cast him in the roles of Stuff, the bartender, and as Rip Torn's understudy in Sweet Bird of Youth, another Tennessee Williams work. Kazan also selected him for an important role with Montgomery Clift in the forthcoming film Swift River. Diane Ladd. At 17, Miss Ladd toured in Tobacco Road with John Carradine. She was seen in the national company of A Hatful of Rain with Ben Gazzara. It's amazing. Hailing from Lumberton, Mississippi, the former Copa Girl has appeared on most major TV series, including The Walter Winchett File, The Big Story, and Naked City, co-starring with Eugene Leontovich. Recently, she was the subject of a photo article in TV Guide. She was last seen on TV starring in the Victor Riesel story. And that was the playbill. On the playbill. That's cool. It's so cool. Diane. A prostitute. Knowing nothing about prostitution, I knew I needed to do some research. So who to ask? I asked my co-star. He said, "You want to see one on the move now?" I said, "Sure." And your father was thinking, "Oh, whoa, this girl is a wild, open person." And here I am, still this naive Mississippi Catholic girl. And so he takes me to this fairly elegant all-night restaurant with tables, booths, and a counter. He whispers to me that we should sit at the counter so we can see all the action. It's about 1:30 in the morning after our play was over. We order a piece of pie. We're sitting at a counter, and way at the other end of the counter is this guy looks like a nice businessman sitting alone. I said, "This is no place where hookers come." But your daddy knew. Sure enough, oh, I wonder why he knew. Sure enough, here comes a really cute woman. She sidles up next to the other guy and orders a cup of tea. And she's putting the make on him right in front of my eyes, and I'm getting to watch this whole thing. The funny part is your daddy thought I was so open-minded when I was just trying to focus on my work, find out how to play this part. Still, I guess he got it into his head that I might be a little wild. So a week later, on our night off, he invited me out to see his home in New Jersey. It was nothing like a place I thought that Bruce would live. He had been married before for a couple of years and wound up staying in the all-American suburban house they'd lived in together. Laura, fascinating. Diane, yep. We had dinner, and we lay on the floor and listened to beautiful classical music. Lying there, I thought your father was the loneliest man I had ever met. My heart just went out to him as a human being. He was the third child of John Dern, a powerful attorney. Of course, I suppose you know that your dad's paternal grandfather was governor of Utah and Secretary of War under Roosevelt. Laura. Yes, but go on. I like hearing you talk about it. Diane. His maternal great grandfather came over from Scotland and worked diligently to form and build a dry goods store that became one of the country's most successful department stores, while his great grandmother formed a major prep school, two colleges, and wrote 5 books. One of their sons, his great uncle, was the poet Archibald MacLeish. Laura, right, I know. Yeah, Diane's beating around the bush here. Diane, they weren't born with a silver spoon. They made and polished that spoon. And by the time your father came along, they were a very successful and well respected family. People always thought your father was the country boy that I was the society girl, but it was the other way around actually. And if you go by our backgrounds, Laura. Okay, so back to your date. Laura wants the nitty gritty of her parents' love. Diane, yes. There I am in your dad's suburban house after our strange prostitute spotting date. Now, Laura, you've asked me about this before, and I haven't told you, so here's the truth. Why not? We do a little kissing on the floor, then I said, I have to go to bed. It was too late for me to go home, so I was going to stay over in the other room. So he goes to his room and I go to mine. Now he gets up to go get some water or something and passes my door. Laura, I swear to God, I really think the angels pushed against my door and opened it because I had closed it. He saw me slightly bending over and slowly my garter belt that came up to mid thigh and removing my stockings slowly so as not to rip them. In those days, we young ladies wore a garter belt with a hose. With hose, pantyhose. Apparently, to him, it was a rather arousing act. Again, I swear to you, I was totally unaware that I had an audience, but your dad really thought that I was doing this for him. He was fascinating. Oh my God, she knows I'm passing her and she's doing that move to turn me on. Laura, well, if you really weren't interested, you would have closed your door tighter. Diane, Laura, my God, by God. I did not know that damn door was open, Laura, and I'm telling you, my angels pushed that door open. So help me God, they pushed that door open. And they said, take off your stockings. I was set up by my own angels. Diane, you hussy. Laura, okay, Mom. Your angels opened your door and made you take your sexy stockings off in a sexy way. Fine. Diane, I'm telling you true. Bruce came back and knocked on the door and said, I brought you a cup of tea. By now I had my gown on, and he came in and was so sweet, and he moved in on me with charm. That's all it took. Honey, I was gone. I decided, I'm going to have sex with him. I said, if we're going to sleep together, we have to use protection. I don't want to get pregnant. He said, you don't have to worry about that. I can't have children. My ex and I tried. They tested me. I'm sterile. Oh my God, Bruce, you're such an asshole. Laura, are you serious? He was lying. Dad, that's outrageous. Diane, no, he wasn't lying. They really tried to have a child. They went to doctors. Bruce was told that he was sterile and couldn't not get anyone pregnant. So I slept with your daddy one time, Laura, and bam, I was pregnant. Months later, his ex-wife came to pick up an old lamp of hers that we had when I opened the door. She saw my stomach. She gave me this dirty look and said, you know, Bruce can't have children. He's sterile. I replied, if Bruce is sterile, you're looking at the Holy Virgin Diane. So, Laura, you tell me how this couple tries for 2 years steadfastly but unsuccessfully to get pregnant. Then this little lady shows up and wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. I'm pregnant in one hit. Laura, I don't know. Maybe it's the power of Diane's angels. Diane, oh, you're too much, Laura. No, it was the hand of God. Here we go. Laura, Mom, maybe you're right. And God had something to do with it, but I think it had a lot to do with your, I don't know, having sex. Diane, it wasn't planned, but it was meant to be. All I know is that the angels were preparing me to have my children. Laura, okay, Mom. So that's how you had my sister. And tell me again where I was conceived. Wasn't it on the set of The Wild Angels? Diane, well, It was when we were making that movie. Roger Corman directed, and it starred Peter Fonda and Nancy Sinatra. It opened the Venice Film Festival that year. Laura, what I heard from Dad was that you had been struggling for a long time to conceive. And then all the bouncing on the back of the Harley must have shaken an egg loose or something. This is fucking hilarious. Diane, oh dear, I don't believe that at all. That sounds like a Bruce Stern story. Laura, well, all I know is Roger Corman likes to say, if it weren't for me, Laura Dern wouldn't have been born. Diane, that's funny. All I know is that Laura Dern was supposed to come here to planet Earth, having chosen Bruce Dern and Diane Ladd to be her parents. I absolutely believe that, honey baby mine. But now I'm tired. I'm really tired. Coughing fit. Hear that noise when I'm coughing? What even is that sound, do you think? Is that the scarring, the reflux, or the infection? Laura, I don't know, Mom. But I do know that you need to stick around for a long, long time. You have a lot more stories to tell me. And they put in this insert of a poster of the Wild Angels. Their credo is violence, their god is hate, and they call themselves the Wild Angels. So, Peter Fonda and Nancy Sinatra were the leads, and Bruce Stern and Diane were the co-stars. Oh, this is a nice little insert. Diane, I was pregnant with Laura when I was doing a film called The Rebel Rousers with Harry Dean Stanton, Jack Nicholson, Cameron Mitchell, and Bruce Stern. And I haven't seen this one. We had to shoot it in Kingman, Arizona when I was 8 months pregnant. I was getting nervous that if something went wrong, I would need a cesarean. When we began shooting in Arizona, I asked, is there a good doctor here? They said, yeah, we have a good old doctor when he's sober. After that, every night, I just lay there and prayed to God, please get me and this baby off this set safely. In one scene, the director had Harry Dean and Jack jumping up and down on the roof of the car I was in, trying to assault my character. The top of the car started to bend in. I jumped out of the car and screamed, that's quite enough of that. I've got a baby in here. They were actually very chivalrous, though. At one point, Jack had to lean toward me menacingly and was very nervous about it. He said he didn't want to actually scare me. When Harry Dean met Laura a few years later, he said, I hope my voice isn't familiar to you. He worried that he'd made a bad impression when his character was trying to attack mine, and she was along for the ride. Wow. Okay. So that's not as in depth about Bruce. Maybe there's more as it goes along. Oh. Let's see here. Might do one more chapter. I like to at least do an hour. I'd love to do more, but I don't know. Just 1 hour is enough for now. If I wasn't so congested, it wouldn't be so bad. Let's see. Walk. 8. The sea is wide. Diane, how lovely to be strolling on Ocean Avenue in Santa Monica. There's nowhere I'd rather be today. Laura, did you know that this is the tree that Jaya and Ellery would climb when they were little? We still come here sometimes to watch the sunset. This is our spot. Diane, oh, I love that. Laura, and see that one limb being held up by that post? Diane, yeah. That's Laura. That's the tree that Ellery took years to finally feel safe enough to climb. He jumped from it as though it was the scariest, hardest thing. What is that? 3 feet up? Diane, yeah. Laura, and now he'll jump off a 20-foot cliff into the ocean without any fear. Did I ever tell you that what Cheryl Strayed told Ellery about fear when he was little? One night, Cheryl and I were on a hike in Northern California with Ellery, and there was something in the bushes, clearly a wild animal. And I was scared, but I was behind them, so Cheryl didn't see my fear. Ellery was walking next to Cheryl, and he heard this loud rustling and flinched. And Cheryl turned to him and she said, Ellery, are you going to let fear be your God or courage be your God? Diane, oh wow. Laura, he says he's never forgotten that moment. Diane, wow, no wonder she's such a great writer. Laura, and friend. Anyway, now he's off to college in a few months, and I'm trying so hard not to have separation anxiety or to worry. To be on his own. I don't know. But it's not my job anymore to remind him to clean the house or to turn off the oven or not to leave a candle lit. I trust his choices, but how do you stop worrying? You don't. Diane, it is the hardest thing, letting go of your kids. And by the way, you never do. Laura, ha. I just remembered that when I was a teenager, one of my friends, another young actress, called me very emotional, sobbing. I said, what's wrong? She said, I went to my therapist crying and he diagnosed me. I have a diagnosis. I said, what's your diagnosis? She said, anticipatory nostalgia. Because I was crying thinking how sad I'll feel when my son goes away to college. She did not even have children yet. She was 18. Diane, I don't know how I let you move out at 17 to go to UCLA. I guess it's because you were moving in with a family friend I trusted. I said, you can't move out of my house unless you find a home that's as spiritual as our home. So you informed me that you were moving in with Marianne Williamson. When someone asked her, why are you letting a 17-year-old girl live in your home? She said, this 17-year-old has more sense than most grown-ups I know. You wanted to fly, and I wanted to love you enough to let you fly. Laura, staying with someone we knew was a safer option. If I was coming and going for work, it was going to be hard to be in a dorm. But then I started working so much, and UCLA wouldn't let me take a gap year. Do you remember? I got offered Blue Velvet 2 days into my first semester and asked to take 8 weeks off to make the movie. I begged them. They said no. In that case, I said, how about a gap year? I gave them the script to read. Surely they'd see it. Okay. Whoa. So Laura's trying to haggle with the mucky monk or the higher ups of UCLA to have time off to film Blue Velvet, so she gave them the script. Yeah, okay. I don't think that was gonna work, girl. Surely they'd see how important it was that I do that movie. They said, not only will you not get a gap year, but I can't believe you're saying goodbye to your college education over this. I believe that. After I left, I wasn't allowed to come back at all. That's a big bag of bullshit. I think you made the right choice, Laura. Diane, it was so stupid of them to not let you take a gap year. Talk about how the system grounds people instead of helping them fly. Well, it's all about money, Diane. Laura, and you want to know the greatest irony? I've heard that if you want a master's degree in film from UCLA, one of the key movies you study, and many have written a thesis on, is Blue Velvet, a movie I got kicked out of that school for doing. I really wanted to go to college, too. Diane, you got ticked off, and with good reason. You made the right choice, of course. When I first saw you up on that screen, I started to cry. So much talent. I thought to myself, this child came through my body so that she could give her gift to the world and entertain people and teach them. I had to find a balance between license and liberty. When you were a teenager, I made sure you had someone to go with you to auditions and press. She was really lucky. Laura, I'm really lucky that you chose savvy women to be around for me as a maternal figure, also giving me some autonomy from it being you. I would never let Jaya go off on location. I don't care if she had 4 nannies. I would never let her act until she was grown. The thing about Laura Dern in Blue Velvet, she has one of the most beautiful introductions, reveals. She comes from the darkness and into the light to Kyle, and it really is beautiful. Really beautiful. Almost, it reminds me of The way Vincent Minnelli lit Judy Garland in Meet Me in St. Louis, the way he framed her obviously did it to enhance her beauty. But when she's already that beautiful, it's a win-win. She's already beautiful and you're framing her to accentuate that beauty for your film. It's like a mutual beneficial complementary exchange. I'm not sure how else to put it, but if you just watch that scene where Laura comes into frame in Blue Velvet, it's really stunning. That's worth giving. That's worth not putting up with UCLA's bullshit. Diane, that's unfair to the soul in your child's body. Everybody has a different path, and some start earlier, and it's your job to listen. Yes, protect, but encourage their gifts. And when you went to do Ladies and Gentlemen, the Fabulous Stains as a teenager, I had guards with you, trustworthy guards. Laura, one guard. Diane, one darn great guard. Laura, one good guard for sure. Diane, damn right. Laura, she ended up taking care of me and Diane Lane. Diane, she took care of the both of you. I was always praying for you every night and calling you, and I flew down to check on you. Laura, yes, you did, with Grandma. Diane, did I bring her along also? Laura, yes. And you wore your favorite thing, that red sweatshirt nightgown that went to the floor. It zipped up in front and had little pockets and a hood, and you used to wear it with Dr. Scholl's sandals. Scholl's? Wow. Diane, oh, some memory, wow. My memory's not that good. I have an actor's memory. I could take a history book home and memorize the whole thing for a test and get an A the next day, but then after that I forget everything I read. I can always learn lines, bam, on the way to the set, but if someone says, I love that line you said in that movie, I don't know what line they're talking about. Laura, ha. Well, that red outfit made an impression. Diane Lane loved it so much that you gave it to her when you left, and she wore it every night after that. Diane, oh, bless her heart. Laura, I can't imagine what it was like for you when I went off to work when I was younger. I'm going to have a taste of that soon when Ellery goes off to college. I'm a little nervous about how I'll handle it. Diane, well, it's a real transition you got to face and to honor. When you left home, I knew you were working and learning, and that brought me a lot of joy. You can have joy and fear and all the emotions at the same time. You just need to look at the big picture of what you're accomplishing and why. Every time I missed you, I made myself think she is spreading her wings. She's learning to live her own life. I was proud of your initiative. It was a great pride that I felt as a parent. I had accomplished something that I was supposed to accomplish, but it was a very hard time feeling you pull away. Laura, when I was out on my own from 18 to 25, those were the years that we fought the most. Is it going to be like that with my kids? What is that going to feel like? I think what I'm afraid of is not my own sadness about it, but feeling lonely. I'm a single mom like you were, so the house is going to feel really empty when the kids are gone. What did you do to distract yourself? Probably worked. Diane, I tried to fill the space. You have to find other things to do. Do you like to sew? Laura, me? Diane, well, do you like to read? Do you like to paint? And maybe there's something you always wanted to do that you never tried. I started taking singing lessons and trying to take piano lessons and just anything that could take my mind and turn it in another direction. Laura, do you remember relief in my leaving home? Was there any part, even if it was 5%, where you felt like Diane's life starts now? Diane, no. Your priority is still not yourself. You try to make it that, and you go off and you do things. But you need to care for that child. But your need to care for that child is there every minute. It never leaves. Never, Laura. That's why there are couples who raise their children and are happy together until the birds fly away, and then the two people look at each other and say, we don't have anything to talk about. There's a vacancy, an emptiness, a hole. It was very hard for me at first. I had good friends, but I wasn't married at the time, and I was very, very lonely. You were my life, my heart. Now I always want to know that you're okay, she cries. Laura, I know how you feel, Mom, truly. What's the expression? A mother is only as happy as her saddest child. We pour it all into this person, then they grow up. Wow. Diane, I know. It's so beautiful, and man, it can just be hell. Laura, both at once, the burden and the bliss, and that goes both ways. When I was young and you were away working, I felt separation anxiety from you too. Diane, do you feel like I screwed you up? Laura, absolutely. Diane, wait a minute. You've got a rough look on your face. Laura, maybe we don't need to look back. Regrets don't always serve, right? Diane, it's okay if you send me sobbing and running away. I can take it. Laura, are you sure you want to go there? Diane, I can take it, Laura. Laura, you really want to hear what I have to say? Okay. Well, to start with, I guess I wish you hadn't been so reactive. Diane, I bet you're thinking of the time I slapped you. Laura, yeah? That's one of my least favorite memories. Diane, it's indefensible, but in my defense, you were being bratty. Laura, in other words, it's not indefensible. Diane, you mouthed off to me, and I had had a horrible day. The shock of your mouthing off to me just sent me spinning, and I couldn't believe it. You were only 10, and you said something really teenage smart at the refrigerator. I'll never forget it. I hated myself for it, and I thought, what am I doing wrong as a parent? How could she talk to me like that? I was devastated. Laura, well, Mom, I appreciate you acknowledging that happened because that's actually a big memory for me. But instead of saying you were devastated that you slapped me, you said you were devastated that you had a daughter who would talk back, so it's still my fault. Then don't bring that shit up because it's not an apology, and I was being bratty. That's your explanation? Not only is that a cop-out, Mom, but I didn't know that my childlike behavior was responsible for making you inappropriate. I'm not holding that anymore. Diane. Okay, deep breath. Let's try it differently. What do you remember? Laura. First of all, I wasn't 10. I was 14. Diane, I don't believe that. I remember you were standing by the refrigerator looking up at me. By 11, you were tall. Diane. Mom, I was 14. Diane, you never let me win an argument. Laura. And what I remember is you cussed at me and called me an awful name and went on about how I was letting you down, not doing all the chores you wanted me to do. You called me selfish. And I said very dramatically, like mother, like daughter. And you slapped me. It was so hardcore. I think you were really unhappy at work and wanted to come home and blame someone else. Diane. I guess I just snapped. Money, money worry, work stress, child support, all kinds of sentiments. Or, not sentiments, all kinds of resentments. I was very angry and I took it out on you, and that's the truth. And I'm sorry. Laura, thank you for that. I will also say that it messed me up, you always calling me your miracle. It felt embarrassing and was an incredibly awkward label to carry or live up to, and it did not give room to just be me, whoever me is. Diane, well, my mother was angry because she hadn't been to her mother's focus. Her mother had 8 children. Mary was the youngest and pissed off that her mother was tired and didn't seem to have enough time or energy for her. So I was Mary's focus, her doll, and my friends were her playmates. My daddy taught me gumption. Stand up for yourself and your beliefs. My mouth is louder because I did a lot of theater acting and I project easily. And I'm Southern, emotional, and a Sagittarian. Laura, that's a lot of reasons. You could just say, sorry. Diane, we all do something wrong. Give me just a second. Let's sit down on that bench. Laura, how about we talk a little bit more? Diane, listen. I try to be loving. Someone treats me wrong and I hold it in and they push, and finally I blow like a steam pot, like hell frosted over, and people don't expect that, you know? It's like, what? Where'd that come from? Of course, I'm the kind of person who, after I confront and blow up and tell you how I feel, I say, you ready to go to a movie? Laura, yeah, exactly. Diane, but that's always true with everybody, isn't it? Laura, no. I mean, the The person that blows up doesn't understand 10 minutes later why the other person's still upset. Because you don't know how the attack feels. And that's been a big thing for me. Learning how to say that I expect to be respected regardless of someone's anger. Diane, right. You are so right. Laura, it means a lot to hear it, Mom. I appreciate that. It was a hard time, and part of it was that you were gone a lot working and I missed you. I'm seeing it from the other side now with my own kids. I mean, at least you had Grandma Mary to help. I don't have that built-in grandma. Diane, I'm a built-in grandma. Laura, you're a working actor, which is gorgeous in a different way. That is inspiring to them that you're still working and doing what you love. Diane, okay. Laura, they see a strong woman. Diane, it takes one to know one. Laura, oh, let me finish. Diane, I will. But let me just say that because of my being a working mother, you got experiences that no kids get. Laura, I know. And we've talked about that before, and you've let me know how lucky I was a lot. Diane, good. Laura, and I let my children know how lucky they are. But here's what we as women don't say to our children enough. I felt so much pain being away from you, and I felt so guilty to leave. So conflicted for me. Diane, I know you feel that way, sweetheart. But do you know what all you do for your children? You teach them about the world. Laura, but you know what? Here's the thing, Diane. You teach them to love, Laura. Laura, I'm not saying this to hurt you, because you definitely let me know how loved I was. I did not have any experience of not knowing my mom loved me. And I know my kids know I love them. You and I were both loving mothers. But what I never said out loud was, I miss you. This is painful. I don't want you away from me. I feel like Jaya so wants to prove that she's a champion of women, and her grandma is such a badass that at 85, she's doing a movie and a TV series. And her mom's working and doing this important movie about mental health and how amazing. And I'm going to be like that when I grow up. But in a way, it doesn't give her room for the other feelings, which are there too. And I didn't have room for that either. She should be able to say, and I should have said, Mom, come home. I hate this. I never wanted to be the kid to make you feel bad for working, and I know Jaya has that too, but Jaya's having a rough time and she deserves to express how she feels without me jumping in to try to make it better. Diane, well, she's having a rough time, but I guarantee you are so are the 19 other kids in her class, including all of them whose families are home and not away for work. Laura, Mom, just let me say this one time and then we can go back to explaining it away, all right? I was the child of a divorced family of working artists who were always traveling for their jobs and sharing a home with a single actress mom. That had many benefits, and I was raised to believe that I could do anything, but this is also the truth. When you're a kid, it hurts to be apart from your mother, and as a mother, it hurts to be apart from your kid. I never told you how much it hurt, but I also never asked you how you felt, because I think you were working so hard to justify why it's always perfectly good. What great experiences I was having. Why it's important that you're making money, and how it's all fine because grandma's there, but it's painful. Diane, quietly. Yes, it is. Laura, I don't think I've ever really talked to you, Mom, about what it felt like to be lonely for you as a kid. And I think you created such wonderful distractions in the comfort in Grandma. I was always with a relative who loved me so fiercely, but still, when you were gone, it was painful. I think I never told you because you remind me you were working because you loved it and you needed to make money. Grandma was supportive of you. I was trying to be very adult and not complain, but the truth is I really missed you. The time I remember missing you the most was after your second divorce. Diane, Yes, that was a really hard time. Laura, when you'd married Bill, we moved to New York together and Grandma had stayed in LA, so I had those couple of years of just you and me. When that marriage ended, I was back in LA and I think I felt a lot of anxiety. You were originating the role of Luann Hampton Laverty Oberlander in a Texas trilogy on Broadway. I have such a strong memory of begging Grandma one night to call you. It was late for you. You had rehearsals the next morning. She explained that we couldn't call you, and that made me sadder to the point of being inconsolable. I was crying so hard I threw up. Then she did call you, and your voice immediately calmed me. You told me to get in your bed and cuddle up with my doll Lucy, in the blanket we always snuggled in, and have Grandma lay with me. And when I got into that position, you said we were going to say a poem together. I still don't know where you found it. You taught me to recite it with you. The sea is wide, and you can't stop it. And I love you, and you can't help it. And if you love me like I love you, nothing in the world can cut our love in two. From that time on, we always did that at bedtime. Wherever you were, you'd call to say goodnight, and we'd say the poem together. Just so you know, Mom, that I've shared that story with you, and you're probably filled with guilt. Know that I have the same amount going through me because I know I've done this to Diane Ellery, and I'm tortured right now. I get it from both perspectives. Diane, okay. I want to come to that. But let me say that this badass working actress grandma is also the same grandma that lay on the grass with her granddaughter Jaya, lay on the grass in a blanket and looked up at the sky. And she and I lay there and looked at the universe and talked, soul to soul, holding hands. The same way, Laura, but Diane, wait. The same way that you and I held hands in New York in the hotel the night that we lost Everall. We held hands laying side by side and our souls were connected that night. Jaya told me later that stargazing was one of the best moments of her life with me. Now I've tried to get back there many times and it's always interrupted. Hell, I'm calling my grandchildren every night. They're too busy to call me back, but here's the thing. That badass grandma made that connection. And let me say this, on behalf of and in defense of our working as mothers, that my cousin back home, one of the sweetest people in the world, had 5 daughters. And if you think that there weren't times that she couldn't be with them, you're wrong. She wasn't off at work, but hell, she had a house to clean and other children to diaper. And she had to get a meal on the table. You think there weren't times when she couldn't stop and be there for a child in need. She couldn't be there all the time either, Laura. And all of us, no matter what it is we're trying to do, go through this as mothers and fathers. The point is, we, by God, cared. Laura, but Diane, and we didn't do everything right, but that's just because we're only vulnerable human beings. I want to meet the person who does it all right. Maybe the Virgin Mary. Are we aspiring to be the Virgin Mary, Laura? Or are we just doing our best? Laura, what I'm doing now is trying to look at what I did wrong and change it. And it's a little late because Jaya is a 16-year-old, but at least I can be honest about how I feel about it. Diane, but you, Laura, I'm about to make a point and you're, Diane, sorry. Laura, highlighting my point perfectly. Diane, slap me. Laura, I would say, just like now, what about the times when you weren't there for 8 weeks? And you're like, but who took you to Europe? And who took you to meet spiritual leaders? And who, right? Diane, yeah. Laura, I think our heartbreak about any mistakes is so great. And Diane, it's because we love big, honey. Oh, she's not wanting to own up to this. Laura, I know. And all I'm trying to do, Mom, is to look. And I'm saying this with love because we have this extra time together. And you're in a marriage, and you have grandchildren, and you have these primary relationships. All we can really offer a loved one when they bring up a negative, instead of going, but you know, what's amazing about that actually is, Diane, you're right. We try to fix it instead of just listening. Laura, shut the fuck up, Diane. She didn't say that, but all we can really offer is just to sit with it If Jaya says, I'm so mad you're not here right now, I need you, I have to remember not to say, but remember, I'm home in 2 weeks. You said you understood I needed to work, and I asked you if you wanted to come. And this will be good for us in so many ways. I have to remember that what she wants to hear is, I know, doesn't this suck? Or, frankly, I should just shut up and listen to her feelings. Diane, yeah. Laura, I mean, fix it or don't. It's not always possible. I can't pull out of this movie at the last minute, but I can say, tell me how you feel. And I can just sit there and take it. Diane, you're right. It doesn't come naturally to me, but I need to do it. I need to just listen to you and take it. And say, I'm sorry I wasn't around more when you were young. I thought it was for the best, and I still do, but you're right. That doesn't mean there wasn't a cost. You don't care about the value of art at 10. Laura, Mom, this is the part this is part of what I love so deeply about you, even in your willingness to have these conversations. You're really not afraid of who you are. You're not afraid of facing the hard stuff. You understand that if you give me room to say what I feel, that it might be helpful to me. That's so cool. Diane, that's true, Laura. I just hate to think you were ever sad. Laura, I know. I feel the same way about Jaya, but let's be honest, parenting is always ultimately a mess. It's terrifying. It's complicated. All we want to do is do it differently than our parents did. And then I think back on when I was working and Ben was on tour and our babysitters Imelda and Marbley were doing the fun part, just like Grandma Mary was with me when I was little. To be clear, they also did a hell of a lot of the hard work. I was so grateful for that help. They did so much for me and the kids, and they did it in such beautiful ways. Still, I found it hard to be away. I couldn't help worrying that I was missing important moments in their lives. I now know how that must have felt for you. Diane, of course. No one's going to overshadow that bond that comes from a mother or a father. But at times I'd come home and all I could think was, oh, look at that. My mother's having fun. She was so proud when she divorced my father that she didn't take any money from him. Oh, really? Well, you know what that means. Now your daughter has to pay your bills. You were too proud to take money from him, so he went and got married to somebody else and spent it on her, and now your daughter has to support you. Oh, isn't that wonderful that you're so proud? Didn't you do a wonderful thing that left me in this position? I mean, come on, Laura. You know what I'm talking about here. So, yes, of course I was pissed off that she's there with you having fun. Curl my hair, Laura. Let's paint her toenails. And I'm working 12-hour days making the money to pay the rent, buy her clothes, put food in her mouth for her to go get entertained and travel and play with you. I was the man of the house. You hear this whine in my voice? Laura. Yeah? Diane, do you hear this child that hasn't grown up? Laura, I get it, Mom. I'm lucky that when I'm not shooting, I get to be home and that I can afford help when I'm away, but even then, it can be so rough. Diane, you shouldn't feel guilty. Laura, easy to say, but harder to feel. A therapist once said to me, your kids are fine. You continue to tell them you don't want to leave and you feel so guilty. And so it's easy for them to start feeling like you think they can't handle it when you're gone. You should be letting them know that they're going to be fine and you're going to go make your art, make money for the family, and they know you'll be back. Diane, listen to your therapist and to your mother. You need to stop feeling so guilty. Laura, now I feel bad that I gave my mom such a hard time about missing her and about slapping me when I was 14. She's gone through so much. I don't need to make her feel guilty on top of it all. But it's the truth. And I'm sure it's Jaya's truth. And Ellery's. Well, you need to ask them, Laura. It's really painful to be little and away from your parents. This has been the downside for me of living an artistic life. An overwhelming guilt over being away from my kids. What consoles me is that the kids have grown up in a creative household. Ben's parents were musicians. Ellery's a born musician. He writes the most incredible lyrics. Jaya signed up for every musical in school and she's a gifted debater. I'd be just as happy if either of them wanted to be a politician or nurse, but I see our family's love of storytelling so powerfully coming through both of them, and I definitely would never trade my lineage or my storytelling genetics for anything. I feel lucky and proud, even though I still feel awful about missing my kids, and when I was in their place, it really sucked to be away from my mom. And there's an insert of Laura, Ellery, and Jaya. It's a beautiful picture.